Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. Thank you so much for listening to my very first episode of my new podcast, and I'm just as excited to explore Florida as you are. So let me introduce myself. I'm Jody, and I'm going to be your tour guide through all things Florida. We're going to explore cities, beaches, breweries, sports teams, jobs, and everything from Jacksonville to Miami and Naples to Pensacola with all the fun little towns and tourist sites in between. So, what do you think of when you think of Florida? Do you think of alligators, theme parks, old people, and beaches? Because none of those are wrong. I Googled, what is Florida known for? And the first things that pop up happen to be beaches, theme parks, natural scenery, and oranges. None of those are really surprising, but that's not all that Florida is known for. I'm going to give you some fun facts about what Florida is known for, to give you a little idea on the state we're going to be talking about. Did you know that Florida has the most golf courses out of any state in America? Not really surprising, since most people do come here to retire and play golf. Did you know that you will not find any dinosaur fossils in Florida? You will, however, find Dinosaur World outside of Tampa and Plant City. Never been. Kind of on my Florida bucket list. Looks interesting. Did you know that Florida is the flattest state in the U.S.? If you've ever driven here, you're kind of aware of that. There's no hills, no real massive terrain to drive over. It's just kind of flat and keeps on going. Do you know that Florida has more than 825 miles of accessible beaches? Those are just the ones you can get to. There's plenty more than that. Sadly, though, not all beaches are created equal. Did you know that Florida is the sunshine state because it has an average of 361 sunny days a year? It doesn't feel like it in the rainy season, but there's always sunshine somewhere in the day. Do you know that Florida is the birthplace of NASCAR out of Daytona and Gatorade from the University of Florida? Florida is also known for its freshwater springs. In fact, it actually has over 700 of them. You can swim in a couple of them. They're absolutely gorgeous. You get to see a lot of manatees, a lot of nature. They're just really fun to visit. They usually stay about the same temperature year-round, so, you're not freezing or not in bath water. It's kind of nice. Did you know that Florida is home to the St. Johns River, which is only one of the few major rivers that actually flow south to north? I don't know why, but I find that kind of interesting. And did you know that no matter where you're at in Florida, you're only ever 60 miles from the nearest body of salt water? So a beach is never too far away. So now that I've told you a couple of those things, Florida is still so much more than just that. But these things also still make up the state in the U.S. that has the most history. And yes, you're right. I did say the most history. No, it wasn't an original colony. But people were here long before the English got mad at each other and went to find somewhere else to live. Side note, yes, I am aware that it was much more than people just getting mad at each other and going somewhere else. But it's kind of in the same line. All right, so Florida's history actually dates back to the 1500s. The history that includes wars, hurricanes, pirate attacks, plagues, Native Americans telling people to leave, and many other weird, strange events that have shaped the state's history. The first people we can actually thank for that history are, in fact, the Spaniards. So Ponce de Leon came to Florida in the 1500s, and he's the one that actually gave us our name. Unfortunately, I'm not good at speaking Spanish, but it's named after the Festival of Flowers because on the day he landed, that was the date. So he named it after flowers, Florida. So we can also thank him for looking into the Fountain of Youth and bringing the first wave of colonization to this part of North America. So the first city in Florida you might think is St. Augustine, but it's not. It's actually Pensacola, but it's not the Pensacola we know today, full of military people, tacky bars, and sunburnt tourists. The city was actually founded in 1559, but of course, it's Florida, so it was destroyed by a hurricane, probably 2 years later, around 1561. And then after Pensacola washed into the Gulf, another set of Europeans were already trying to make Florida livable again, with Fort Caroline, which is actually now what is near Jacksonville today. I have been to the Fort Caroline, and it's a good representation of what it used to be. It's a fun little area. You can walk around. It's on the river. It just kind of gives you an idea of what they went through and what they dealt with. It's interesting if you just ever want to go explore somewhere in Jacksonville. But these people were not the only people in this area. They had to deal with the Native Americans and then another small settlement that was called St. Augustine. St. Augustine was actually founded by Pedro Menendez de Avilés in 1565. Side note, the only reason I can say that's because I live here and I've heard it plenty of times. And St. Augustine actually still stands today, even though it has been through, and I'm sorry, Q, I will not get this right like the tour, hurricanes, fires, plagues, numerous attacks from pirates and other European nations, and many other strange events, but the city still stands. St. Augustine has had the distinction of being the oldest continuously inhabited European city in any United States. And it still has its beautiful Castillo de San Marco to welcome you into the city, and along with plenty other historic churches, buildings, graveyards, and some not so historic bars, but are still fun to go into. And it's not the only city in Florida with an interesting past. In fact, most cities in Florida have an interesting past, whether it's because they were founded by industry or people just didn't want to live with each other anymore. But we'll get into all that on another podcast. So now that I've told you a little bit about the history of Florida, and thanks to colonialism and trade in Florida, we're now one big melting pot that only adds to our history. It brings us beautiful architecture, some amazing scenery, and some delicious food. So here's a few actual historical facts about Florida. Fort Moose, I've never been able to say that right, was legally the first sanctioned free black settlement in what is now the United States. And it was actually founded in 1738, which is long before the Civil War. The Spanish actually helped to settle and give that settlement in what is just north of the city of St. Augustine. If you ever get the chance to visit, it's actually a really, really cool place. They do cannon firings. I believe it's the first Saturday of the month. So if you just want to go check something out that's different, or if you're just interested in the history, definitely go there. It's right off US 1. Florida was also the 27th state. It got its statehood on March 3rd, 1845. Did you know that sunscreen was invented in Florida in 1944 by Benjamin Green out of Miami? I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's the most sunniest state. We have him to thank for that. At least the pale people like me do. So I'm happy. Did you know that Disney World opened just south of Orlando in 1971? And yes, I'm sure most of you did. There's a lot of Disney fanatics. The Everglades were actually established as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979. And I find that really interesting. I didn't realize that it was a World Heritage Site until I was doing research for this podcast. It's actually got a huge, diverse population of alligators, crocodiles, many other wildlife, and it's just a really pretty place to go and see. Watch for the alligators, but if you ever get the chance to go down there and check it out, I definitely recommend it. And Neil Armstrong launched from the Kennedy Space Center in 1969 and became the first man to walk on the moon. Thank you, NASA, for establishing the Space Coast in Florida. It's actually a really fun place to visit as well. If you ever get the chance, go check out the Space Center. Now, Florida has a very diverse history, and we've talked about some of it, and it's also led us to the state that we are today, the Sunshine State. And it's always been a tourist destination, the place to retire, a golfer's paradise, the home of $20 bottles of water at theme parks, bad tattoos, sunburns, great hole-in-the-wall bars that you can find walking down Duval Street or whatever town you're in. And it's also home to Florida Man. That's right, the infamous Florida Man. And I want to include a Florida Man story in every podcast, just for something fun. And today's story, I got, thank you to Google. Fun fact, if you do Google a date in Florida Man, you usually get a fun story. It comes us from January of 2015. The headline and the story pretty much explains itself. Florida Man in Seriously, I Have Drugs t-shirt was arrested for, you guessed it, drug possession. Thank you, Florida Man, for entertaining us and teaching us what not to do in public. So that wraps up my first episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've learned a little bit about the state that we're going to explore. In case you're wondering, I did get my sources from visitflorida.com, history.com, and Wikipedia, and Google. Just Google search, and it brings you a million things. So you can follow That Florida Feeling on Instagram and Facebook. Both pages are the same name as the podcast. We also have a Twitter. It's That Florida Feel, because Twitter limits everything. So thank you to everyone who has listened, subscribed, liked, and heard me ramble on about this for weeks before actually doing it. I want to say thank you so much. And please feel free to reach out to me at That Florida Feel, all lowercase, thatfloridafeel@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for an episode, I would definitely love to do research and we can talk about something that you guys are interested in. I also have the hope to do a listener story. If you have a second, you can email me at thatfloridafeel@gmail.com and tell me the most Florida thing ever you've seen, witnessed, or done. I kind of want to get a listener's episode eventually, so when I have enough of those, we'll actually do that episode, but email me. Any comments, any suggestions, I appreciate it, you guys. This is my first podcast, so it's a little bit of trial and error, but please don't forget to like and follow the Facebook and Instagram or even Twitter pages. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for listening, and that was your daily dose of sunshine.